On a quiet Japanese night in 1945, a freight train races along the coastline. It carries troops and supplies for a dying empire. It never reaches its destination. The rails erupt in a wall of fire and steel. A locomotive is ripped off the track and thrown into the air. The explosion happens on Japanese soil, but the men who planted the charge came not from the land, not from the sky, but from the sea. They are American submariners from the USS Barb. And this is the only time in the entire war that a United States submarine will blow up a train on the enemy's home ground. Wikipedia? Now the story rewinds. Back from the blast. Back from the screaming metal. Back into the darkness of the Pacific. Summer 1945. Officially, the Japanese Empire is still fighting. In reality, it is bleeding out. Convoys are shredded, ports are burning. Cities are being erased from maps. But out here, far from the headlines, the war is decided by steel tubes stalking under the waterline. Among them is one boat that the Japanese have learned to fear more than most. A fleet submarine that hunts where others hesitate to go. The USS Barb. History. Navy Palawan. The Barb is on her 12th war patrol. To an outsider, that is just a number. To the men on board, it is a countdown. Each patrol survived means the odds are getting worse. They know that by this stage of the war, many of the Japanese ships left are heavily guarded. Depth charges fall faster, sonar operators are sharper, pilots are more desperate. A single error can turn this submarine into a mass grave on the ocean floor. Yet instead of playing it safe, the Barb is heading closer to Japan than ever before. Together, we served +1. In the control room stands the man driving this risk. Commander Eugene Fluckey. A compact, energetic officer with a calm voice and a brain that never stops calculating. He is not a myth. He already has a Medal of Honor for an earlier patrol, when he drove the Barb into a Japanese harbor, torpedoed enemy ships at point-blank range, and escaped through shallow waters and a storm of depth charges. On paper, that mission should have killed them all. Instead, it became his signature. He is now the commander who breaks patterns and wins. Words of veterans +1. For the crew, Fluckey is both reassurance and danger. They trust him because he keeps bringing them home. They fear him because he refuses to fight a boring war. When he looks at the chart, he does not just see safe lanes and risk zones. He sees opportunities, places where no one has tried to take a submarine, harbors, coastal shipping lanes, even train tracks that run close to the sea. He is the kind of commander who asks himself not, "Is this allowed?" but, "Can this work?" That mindset is exactly what will lead the Barb from hunting ships to hunting a train. US Nautilus +1? Inside the hull, the crew live in conditions that crush weaker men. The air is thick with oil, sweat, and metal. There is no privacy. You sleep next to a torpedo. You eat inches away from high-pressure pipes and electrical panels. In the silence at depth, every clank and creak sounds like a threat. Faces are young. Many have never seen Japan, only its ships through a periscope lens. They know statistics. They know how many submarines never came back. And they know that if the hull cracks, there is no rescue. Only a few seconds of panic, then cold black water. History. Net +1? Despite that, or maybe because of it, this boat has something rare in late 1945. Momentum. Barb has a confirmed record of sunken tonnage that makes other crews watch her with a mix of admiration and envy. In previous patrols, she has destroyed transports, tankers, escorts. Japanese sailors write reports about a submarine that appears inside heavily guarded areas, strikes with brutal precision, and vanishes before retaliation hits. They call it a nightmare. American officers call it aggressive tactics. The crew just call it their job. National interest +2? On this patrol, the map in the control room tells a simple truth. To hit what is left of Japan's supply lines, the Barb must move north into waters around Hokkaido and the shores of Sakhalin. Shallow depth, tight channels, heavy patrols, minefields. In a classroom, this area is labeled extremely dangerous. In Fluckey's mind, that label also reads high value. Enemy coasts are closer, shipping is more concentrated. And somewhere out there, just a few hundred meters inland, Japanese trains are still moving under the assumption that the war at sea cannot touch them. Naval gazing +1? The decision is made with no dramatic announcement. Orders are given in a level tone. Course changes. The helmsman repeats the heading. The boat turns. Engines thrum through the hull as the Barb slides toward the enemy homeland. On the surface at night, the men on watch see only a black horizon and faint starlight. Below, in the narrow control room, eyes move between gauges, depth indicators, and the captain's face. Everyone understands that they are crossing an invisible line. From this point on, any mistake will not just be dangerous. It will be fatal. What none of them fully knows yet is that this patrol will not be remembered just for ships sunk or tonnage claimed. It will be remembered because this submarine, under this commander, will step outside the normal rules of naval warfare. The USS Barb will leave the safety of the sea, reach into Japan's own coastline, and hit a target that no other American crew has ever touched. The men do not see the future. They only feel the tension rising, the coastline getting closer, and a shared sense that something different is coming. And in the dark, under the cold surface of the Pacific, the ghost submarine moves silently toward the enemy shore, hunting not just ships, but a chance to do something that will shock even their own side. In the gray light of early morning, the Japanese coastline finally appears. Not as a clear picture, but as a darker line against a darker sky. For the men of the USS Barb, this is not just another patrol area. This is Japan, the home islands, the place they have heard about in briefings, rumors, and casualty reports, but never seen with their own eyes. Now the enemy is no longer an abstract idea on a chart. It is the outline of hills, the shadow of trees, and the faint suggestion of towns hidden just beyond the shore. The closer Barb gets, the more the ocean changes. The deep, comforting blue of open water is gone. Here, near Hokkaido and the coast of Sakhalin, the sea becomes shallow and unpredictable. The bottom rises and falls. Sandbanks and rocks wait for any mistake. There is less room to dive, less space to hide. A depth charge in the open Pacific can be survived. In these tight coastal waters, a well-placed pattern can crush a submarine against the seabed like a soda can. The charts warn about minefields and patrol routes. The crew understands what coastal operations really means. More targets, more danger, less margin for error. From the periscope, the view is almost unreal. Fishing boats, small coasters hugging the shoreline, smoke smudges from chimneys in distant villages. Occasionally, a train whistle carries faintly over the water, a thin sound carried by the wind. For a few seconds it feels like looking at a peaceful country morning. Then the reality returns. Every boat, every pier, every piece of infrastructure belongs to an enemy that has spent years trying to kill them and their friends. The beauty of the scene does not make it safer. It only makes it more surreal. Fluckey does not waste time admiring the view. He studies it. He wants patterns. Where do the ships move? When do they move? How close do they come to shore? How often do patrol craft appear? He orders soundings taken constantly. He keeps the boat moving, never staying in one spot long enough for the enemy to register a pattern. To the crew, it starts to feel like they are sneaking through someone's backyard with a loaded weapon, praying not to trip an alarm. One wrong turn, one misread depth, and the Barb will be trapped where it cannot dive deep and cannot run fast. The first contact comes in the form of distant propeller beats on sonar. Merchant ship. Then another. Then an escort. It is proof that this area is still alive with traffic. Japan is cut off, but not yet strangled. Supplies, fuel, and troops are still moving along the coast, backed by patrol vessels that know every inlet and channel. When a target appears within reach, the rhythm on board changes instantly. Orders snap out. Depth adjusted. Torpedo rooms, reports ready. Everyone moves into positions that they have practiced too many times to count. The tension turns into focus. This is where the Barb is in her element. A contact grows clearer. Range closes. Through the periscope, silhouettes become shapes, then ships. A Japanese freighter pushing through the gray water, guarded by a smaller escort that believes shallow water and shoreline are enough protection. Fluckey knows better. He picks his firing point with cold precision, factoring in depth, speed, and the limited escape routes. The men at the torpedo tubes wait for the only words that matter. Fire 1, fire 2, fire 3. The compressed air thumps, the fish leave their tubes, invisible killers slipping through the water toward the targets. There is always a special silence between firing and impact. Conversation dies. Men stare at gauges but hear nothing except their own heartbeat. Someone counts under their breath. Then it comes. A heavy, distant crack. Then a second. The freighter shudders in the periscope lens, lifting sideways as water and steel explode underneath it. Smoke and flame burst out. Men on the enemy deck run in every direction. The escort swings around, frantic, searching the waves for a periscope that is already lowering back into the safety of the deep. For the crew of the Barb, it is confirmation. Even here, right under Japan's nose, they can still hit hard. The revenge is immediate. Sonar reports rapid screws. The escort has guessed the general area. Depth charges roll into the sea. The explosions come in violent clusters, hammering the water above them. The hull groans and shudders. Lights flicker. A coffee mug shatters on the deck. The pressure crushes inward from every side. It feels like the ocean itself is trying to compact the submarine into scrap. Men grab whatever they can to stay steady, eyes on the captain and the depth gauge. There is no heroism in this moment, only endurance and discipline. You hold your breath. You wait for the pattern to pass, or for the sound of tearing metal. That means it is over. Fluckey rides the storm with a cold, narrow focus. He orders tiny course changes, subtle alterations in depth, constantly trying to slide the Barb outside the enemy's guessed kill box without breaking cover. He will not surface until he is sure they have shaken contact. Minutes feel like hours. The depth charges gradually move farther away, then stop. The silence that follows is almost as loud as the explosions. Only then does the commander allow the crew to exhale. Another attack survived. Another ship gone. Another reminder that every success is paid for with a roll of the dice. As the patrol continues, the attacks add up. A tanker here, a transport there. Smaller coastal craft sunk by gunfire when conditions allow them to surface briefly under cover of darkness. Each success dents Japan's ability to move fuel, weapons, and troops along its own shores. But something starts to bother Fluckey. He can hit ships. He has proven that many times. Still, he feels that these late war patrols are more than just accounting. Japan is already collapsing. The real victory now is psychological. To show the enemy that even their home coastline is not safe. To send a message that will be remembered long after tonnage statistics are forgotten. It is during these days, watching trains move along the coastline and seeing villages that have never seen an American soldier, that the idea begins to take shape. The submariners of the Barb are closer to Japan than most American ground troops will ever be. They can see the tracks. They can hear the distant trains that move unchallenged just beyond the beach. The war at sea stops at the shoreline. The war on land stops at the waterline. Between those two zones, there is a gap, a blind spot in the enemy's mind. And Fluckey, the commander who hates limits, begins to wonder what would happen if a submarine crew stepped across that invisible line. For now, the men only sense that their captain is thinking ahead of the mission statement. They see how long he studies the coastline through the periscope. They hear the questions he asks about tides, beach gradients, and distances to the tracks. They notice how often he returns to the chart table and how little he speaks when he does. The Barb is still doing what submarines do best, stalking and sinking ships in shallow, hostile water. But beneath that visible mission, a new purpose is quietly forming, one that will change what a submarine can do and where this patrol will end. Without a sound, the idea crosses a line in Eugene Fluckey's head, from crazy thought to possible mission. He has spent days watching Japan's coast glide past the periscope. Ships can be sunk, harbors can be raided. He has done all that. But the sight that keeps bothering him is the one that no submarine is supposed to touch. Trains running just beyond the beach, confident that the ocean cannot reach them. Somewhere between another torpedo attack and another pattern of depth charges, he stops asking himself if this is insane and starts asking the only question that matters to him. Can this be done? He does not call the whole crew. This is not a speech moment. This begins quietly in the cramped space of the wardroom and the control room chart table. There, under dim red lights, with charts spread open and pencils stuck behind ears, he brings the first officers into the thought. What if a submarine did not stop at the water's edge? What if, instead of just sinking ships, they hit Japan, where it does not expect an attack at all? On land, on its own rail lines, with its own civilians and soldiers watching. The room goes still. No one laughs. They know him too well. If he is saying it out loud, he is already halfway to trying it. The objections come first, as they should. How do you land a team on a hostile shore from a submarine, at night, close to villages and guard posts? How do you keep them from being cut off if something goes wrong? How do you place an explosive on a rail line under the nose of the enemy without being heard, seen, or betrayed by some detail they did not think about? And the biggest question, what happens to the Barb if the landing party is detected and captured? The Japanese will search the waters, they will hunt, and a submarine trapped in shallow water with enemy forces fully alerted is as good as dead. Fluckey listens to every argument. That is part of his strength. He does not lead by pretending the danger is small. He leads by acknowledging that the danger is real and then attacking the problem until it looks smaller. He breaks the mission into parts. First, can they physically reach the shore with a small team? Second, can they place a charge capable of derailing a train? Third, can they get off the beach and back to the submarine before the enemy can react? Each element becomes a technical problem instead of a vague fear. Technical problems are something these men understand. The landing method comes first. They will not send a large party. A big group makes noise, leaves tracks, and moves slowly. They need a handful of men, the kind who can crawl, run, and improvise under pressure. The submarine has a small inflatable boat that can be launched in the dark. It is not designed for a commando raid, but it is what they have. The plan is simple and brutal. Surface at night at the closest safe distance. Put the team in the boat. Row them to shore with paddles, and then wait off the coast, silent and blacked out, until they signal or until time runs out. No rescue if they are late. No second try. Then comes the question of the explosive. A standard naval mine is too heavy and too obvious. Torpedoes are out of the question. They need something compact, strong, and triggered not by a man on the scene, but by the train itself. The idea that forms is ugly and elegant at the same time. Create an improvised rail bomb, a charge powerful enough to blow out a section of track and throw a locomotive off the line, with a fuse that is activated when the weight of the train closes a simple electrical circuit. No radio, no timer that can be delayed or misjudged. The train itself will sign its own death warrant by touching the rails. Planning an improvised device like this inside a submarine, under combat conditions, is not a clean workshop exercise. It is controlled chaos. Men in the torpedo room and engine spaces pull together what they can. Explosives from demolition charges, wire, switches, pieces of equipment that can be repurposed. They sketch out circuits on scrap paper. They argue over reliability. They test connections in corners of the boat where a mistake will not blow them all to pieces. Every part has to be simple enough that a sailor, soaked, dirty, and under stress, can arm it in the dark without getting confused. Failure on that beach means not just a wasted effort, but men caught in the open next to a suspicious package. Once the rough device exists, the question becomes, who will carry it? Fluckey does not assign names. He asks for volunteers. On a submarine like the Barb, filled with men who have survived multiple patrols, the reaction is immediate. Hands go up faster than he can count. Some volunteer out of raw courage, some out of pride, some out of a dark calculation that if they pull this off, they will never again be just anonymous faces in a crew photo. In the end, he selects a small group that balances skills. Men who can handle explosives, men who move well on land, and men he trusts to stay calm when everything goes wrong. They become, unofficially, his shore party. This selection changes the atmosphere on board. The rest of the crew now knows that they are not just on another patrol. They are preparing to do something no American submarine has done. Conversations in the mess become sharper. The usual jokes about bad coffee and tight bunks are replaced by questions about terrain, patrol habits, and how far sound travels at night on a quiet beach. The chosen men practice with the inflatable boat. They imagine the weight of the explosive package, the feel of sand under their boots after months at sea, the sound of their own breathing when every twig and rock might betray them. The plan, however, is more than just courage and hardware. Timing is everything. They must find a stretch of track close enough to the shoreline that the landing party can reach it quickly, but far enough from major installations that the immediate response will not be overwhelming. They need to observe train schedules as best they can from the sea, tracking whistles and smoke patterns over several days. They must identify a section of track where a wrecked train will cause maximum disruption and shock. Not just a minor derailment in the middle of nowhere. That means closer to villages, signal posts, and supply lines. That also means more eyes and more ears to catch them if they make a sound. All of this planning takes place while the Barb is still doing her regular job. Between depth charge attacks and torpedo runs, the officers slip back to the charts, adjusting pencil lines and recalculating distances to shore. The mission now has layers. On the surface, they are a submarine hunting ships in dangerous water. Beneath that, there is a second mission growing, one that does not look like anything written in official doctrine. The crew live with this dual reality. One moment they are tracking a convoy, the next they are discussing how fast a man can crawl across gravel without being heard from 50 meters away. There is a point in every risky plan where it either dies under the weight of its problems or hardens into a decision. For Fluckey, that point comes after he has studied the charts, listened to his officers, and weighed the risk not just to his boat, but to the overall war effort. If they succeed, they will hit Japan in a way no one expects, proving that even the home islands are vulnerable on land. If they fail, the Barb could be lost with all hands, and the mission will vanish into the file of operations that never returned. In the end, his reasoning is brutally simple. The war is in its final, desperate phase. Playing safe will not shorten it. A bold strike might. So he makes the call. The Barb will go in close. They will find the right stretch of coastline, the right set of rails, and the right night. They will put Americans with explosives on Japanese soil, not as an army of thousands, but as a handful of men from a submarine that refuses to accept its traditional limits. The shore party will carry their improvised bomb. They will try to disappear into the darkness, plant their device under the nose of the enemy, and then race the clock back to the waiting boat. The order does not go out as a dramatic speech over the intercom. It moves through the boat as a fact. The mission is on. The men who volunteered start checking their gear with a new seriousness. The others sharpen their focus on their own roles because if anything goes wrong on that beach, the only thing standing between them and an enraged coastline will be how fast the Barb can move and how precisely she can vanish. Somewhere ahead, beyond the quiet waves and the thin strip of sand, trains still run on schedule, their crews confident that the war cannot reach them here. On board the Barb, that belief has just been sentenced. The submarine that has already changed the rules of naval warfare is now preparing to change the rules of where the war can be fought. At all night over the Japanese coast does not feel empty. It feels like a trap that has not been triggered yet. The sky is overcast. There is no moon, only a faint grayness that separates sea from land. The USS Barb lies on the surface at low speed, engines barely turning, a dark shape against darker water. Orders move in quiet, clipped voices. No one raises their tone. Everyone understands that sound carries farther at night. Every clank, every dropped tool, every careless word could be the one detail that ruins everything. On deck, the selected shore party gathers near the small inflatable boat. They wear dark clothing, soft shoes, and carry only what they absolutely need. No helmets, no bulky gear. Each man has a life jacket, a weapon, and a share of the equipment. One carries the main explosive charge, packaged, to be as compact as possible. Another carries wire and tools. Another has the firing device and spare parts in case something fails. It is not a Hollywood commando unit. It is a handful of submariners who until now have lived inside steel walls, about to step into a world of trees, dirt, and unknown eyes. The briefing for the mission is not long. At this point, everyone involved already knows the plan by heart. The landing point has been chosen based on days of observation. A stretch of coastline where the beach is narrow, the ground rises gently, and the railway tracks run within a manageable distance from the waterline. There are signs of human presence nearby, but no major garrison. The schedule of trains has been estimated from whistles and smoke seen over several nights. The aim is simple: plant the charge, rig the firing system, get back to the boat, and be far enough away by the time a train hits the rails. Fluckey stands with them on deck for the final checks. He does not give a grand speech. He confirms details. Distance to shore, bearing to the target, time limits, signal procedures. If they are compromised on land, the Barb cannot come charging in like a rescue ship. This is a one-shot operation. Either they return on time, or they do not return at all. The men know it, and that knowledge sharpens their focus more than any emotional words could. There is a brief moment of dark humor, a few muttered comments about bringing back a piece of the train as a souvenir. The jokes are not to dismiss the danger, but to keep their hands from shaking. Then comes the part that actually makes the mission real. The boat is lowered. The men climb in. From above, the inflatable looks absurdly small against the vast black water and the outline of the coast. Paddles dip in near-perfect silence. No one splashes. No one talks. On the Barb's deck, shadowy figures watch them go, feeling more exposed with every yard the boat moves away. Submariners are used to fighting unseen, protected by depth and steel. Watching their own shipmates leave that safety and head toward enemy land presses on every nerve in the hull. The run to shore feels longer than it is. The men in the boat move in a steady rhythm, eyes constantly flicking between the darker line of the beach and the glimmering shape of the submarine behind them. The smell of land reaches them first, a mix of damp earth and vegetation that feels almost alien after so long in metallic air. As the surf grows louder, they slow down, judging each wave, trying to avoid a roll that would dump them and their precious cargo into the shallows with a splash loud enough to wake the coastline. When the keel grinds softly into sand, time seems to split. On one side is everything they know: the submarine, the routines, the cramped safety of the boat. On the other side is this: enemy territory, actual Japanese soil under their boots. They haul the boat higher in silence, drag it above the waterline, and pull it just enough into the shadows that it will not be obvious at a quick glance. Every movement feels too loud. Every breath seems like it could carry to the nearest farmhouse. They pause, crouching low, listening. No shouts, no footsteps, only wind, the distant rhythmic breath of waves, and the faint chirp of night insects. The landscape between the beach and the railway line is not dramatic. Low scrub, patches of grass, hard-packed earth, but to the shore party it might as well be an enemy fortress. They move in a crouch, staying as close to natural cover as they can. The man with the explosive package guards it like a newborn. Branches catch on clothing. Small stones shift underfoot. Each tiny sound feels amplified in their imagination. They have to fight the urge to rush. Speed can cause mistakes. Mistakes cause noise. Noise brings attention. Attention ends the mission, and possibly all of them. The first sight of the tracks is almost a shock. Two parallel lines of steel on wooden ties, cutting through the night, with a simple, indifferent geometry. There is a faint smell of oil and metal, the residue of countless trains that have passed this point believing it to be safe. The men drop low, scanning the area. They look for signal posts, huts, any sign of guards or workers. Nothing moves nearby. That does not mean they are alone. It only means no one is obvious. They work under the assumption that eyes could be watching from a dark window or from the edge of a nearby stand of trees. Setting the charge turns the abstract plan into something brutally real. Two men work under the rail, hands steady, placing the explosive so that the force will blow upward and inward, tearing the track out of alignment and throwing the train off balance at full speed. Another unspools wire like a spider laying a web, careful not to snag it on anything that could later reveal its path. The man handling the firing system checks connections, then checks them again. The design is simple. The weight of the locomotive completes an electrical circuit when its wheels pass a certain point, triggering the detonator. There is no room for guesswork. The device must be secure enough not to be disturbed by wind or small vibrations, yet sensitive enough to respond to the mass of a moving train. All this is done in near total darkness, illuminated only by tiny, shielded flashes, when absolutely necessary, using as little light as possible to avoid detection. Sweat makes their fingers slippery. Knees and palms grind into gravel and dirt. Every so often they freeze in place at some distant sound. A dog barking, the creak of wood, the faint echo of a voice carried by the wind. Each time, the noise fades without turning into an alarm. Each time they return to work with hearts pounding a little harder. When the last connection is made, the team moves a short distance away to a chosen observation spot. A shallow depression with some natural cover that gives them a clear view of the tracks and the surrounding area. They cannot go back to the boat yet. They need confirmation that the circuit is sound, that the charge is hidden but not obstructed, and that no curious local wanderer stumbles onto their work. There is nothing more to adjust without risking unnecessary movement. Now there is only waiting. Waiting turns out to be the hardest part. Time stretches. There is no clock, only the sense of how long they have been off the submarine and the rough estimates made from previous nights of listening to train whistles. The silence presses on their ears. Every normal sound of nightlife feels like a potential threat. Somewhere in the distance, a dog barks again, closer this time. A door slides shut. A faint light appears briefly in a house and then goes out. They cannot shake the awareness that they are a few wrong seconds away from having civilians walking near them, or a patrol cutting across their path. Then finally, the sound they have been waiting for arrives. At first, it is a low vibration in the rails, more felt than heard. Then the distant, rhythmic clatter of wheels on track. A train approaching at speed. A thin beam of light appears far down the line, growing gradually brighter and whiter as it comes closer. The men press themselves as low as they can, barely breathing. This is the point of no return. That train is full of people who do not know that a handful of American submariners have turned a piece of their daily routine into a killing ground. The locomotive bears down on the trigger point, heavy and unstoppable. In those last seconds, there is a strange clarity. Either the device fires or it does not. Either the plan will be remembered as a legend, or the train will pass harmlessly overhead and leave them with a live bomb under an active track and a rapidly collapsing window of safety. The front wheels hit the armed section of rail. The circuit closes. The charge answers. The explosion rips through the night, louder and closer than any depth charge they have heard from underwater. Fire and debris erupt from the track. The locomotive lurches violently, one side lifting off the rails, metal shrieking as it tears free of its path. Cars behind it slam into each other, twisting, buckling, some leaving the track entirely and rolling into a chaos of shattered wood and steel. The sound is a combination of thunder, tearing metal, and human panic. A single brutal moment of destruction in a place that had never expected to be a battlefield. For a heartbeat, the men just stare. It is one thing to imagine the result of their work in the safe abstraction of a diagram. It is another to see an actual train, a symbol of civilian life and military logistics combined, torn apart in front of them because of something they wired with their own hands. The shock is real, but there is no time to sit in it. Shouts rise near the wreck. Lights start to appear. Doors slam open. The quiet coastal night is gone, replaced by the confusion and horror of a population realizing that the war has just walked onto their doorstep. The shore party snaps back into motion. They do not move toward the wreck. They turn away from it, heading back the way they came, staying low, sticking to the same patches of cover they used before. The temptation to run is strong, but running makes noise. Noise draws eyes. They move as fast as they can without losing control, trusting that the chaos around the train will pull attention away from the beach for a few crucial minutes. Every new shout, every flash of light behind them, reminds them that those minutes are disappearing quickly. When they reach the sand, the boat is still where they left it, a small, dark shape just above the waterline. There is no sign that anyone has found it. They shove it into the surf, pile in, and start paddling, muscles burning from the combination of adrenaline and exhaustion. Behind them, the glow of flames from the derailed train reflects faintly on the low clouds, a red smear against the horizon. They know that within minutes, if not already, someone will be on a radio, calling coastal defenses, reporting a disaster that looks too precise to be an accident. Out on the water, the Barb waits, running dark, a shadow barely distinguishable from the sea itself. Lookouts peer into the night, straining for any hint of the returning boat. The men on the submarine have heard the explosion. There was no way not to. The noise rolled out over the water and into their bones. They know what it means. The plan worked. But success changes nothing about the danger. If the shore party does not reappear soon, there will be decisions to make that no commander wants to face. At last, shapes appear on the surface, low and hard to see, then resolve into the outline of the inflatable and the men inside it. A quiet signal is exchanged. Lines are thrown down. Hands reach out and haul the soaked, exhausted saboteurs back onto the deck. There is no cheering, no shouting, just hard claps on shoulders, quick questions to confirm that everyone is accounted for, and then immediate movement to clear the deck. The time for celebration, if there ever is one, is not now. As soon as the boat is secured and the last man drops through the hatch, the Barb slides back under the surface. Engines come up. Course changes. The submarine heads away from the coast, leaving behind a burning wreck that will be studied, photographed, and argued over by Japanese officers who never imagined that an American attack on their home soil could come from under the sea. Under the waterline, in the dim red glow of the control room, the crew begin to understand the scale of what they have just done. They have not just sunk another ship, they have crossed an invisible boundary. They have taken a war that was supposed to be divided between land and sea and smashed that barrier with an inflatable boat and an improvised bomb. The USS Barb has just carried out the only confirmed operation in which a United States submarine crew destroyed a train on enemy territory. The shock wave of that act is still expanding on shore. On board the submarine, it settles into something else. A realization that, after this night, their patrol will never be just another line in a logbook. The impact of the train explosion follows the Barb out to sea like an invisible wake. No one on board needs a formal announcement to understand that they have just done something entirely outside the normal boundaries of submarine warfare. They can see it in the faces of the shore party as they peel off wet clothes and try to stop their hands from shaking. They can feel it in the way conversation drops to half sentences and long pauses. These men have lived through depth charges and near misses, but stepping onto enemy soil, blowing up a train, and then slipping back into the ocean has a different weight. It feels less like a patrol action and more like they have reached into the enemy's private space and slammed a door. In the hours after the operation, the Barb runs farther from the coast, changing course and depth in a careful pattern designed to confuse anyone trying to hunt her. Routine gradually reasserts itself. Watches rotate, coffee is poured, machinery hums, but the quiet is not the same as before. The crew all know what the Japanese coastline now looks like behind them. A torn section of track, a derailed locomotive, wrecked cars, soldiers and civilians trying to make sense of an attack that does not fit any previous pattern. Somewhere ashore, officers will be arguing over whether it was sabotage, an air raid, or some freak accident. The idea that a handful of submariners did this will be the hardest explanation to accept. Fluckey does not hold a victory speech. That is not his style. Instead, he moves through the boat, checking on the men, talking in low, direct tones. He wants to hear from the shore party what went right and what almost went wrong. He asks about the landing surf, the feel of the ground, how close the nearest houses seemed, how the device behaved under real pressure. It is part debrief and part quiet recognition. By treating the mission as a job that needed to be done well, rather than as a stunt, he reinforces the idea that their courage and skill were not a lucky gamble, but a professional execution of a calculated risk. Word about the attack will move ahead of them. When the Barb eventually reaches friendly port and the story begins to spread through mess halls, wardrooms, and briefings, it will sound almost unreal. A submarine crew that not only raided harbors and sank ships, but put men ashore to blow up a train on Japan's own soil. For other submariners, it will be a mix of admiration and disbelief. For surface officers, it will be a reminder that undersea warfare is evolving beyond simply ambushing convoys. For the higher command, it is proof that a single boat with an aggressive commander can create effects far beyond the tonnage of its kills. As the war in the Pacific draws to its end, the legacy of the Barb's patrols takes shape. This is not a boat that survived by hiding. It is a boat that repeatedly went into the most dangerous waters, struck targets others would have considered unreachable, and came back. Over the course of her career, she racks up an impressive list of sunken enemy ships and heavily damaged tonnage, earning a reputation as one of the most aggressive submarines in the U.S. fleet. Her commander receives the highest honors for previous actions, and the train mission becomes the kind of story that instructors tell new generations when they want to explain what initiative really means in war. For the crew, however, the meaning of what they did is more personal. Many of them will go home and try to explain to families and friends what it felt like to live for weeks inside a steel tube, and then, for one night, step onto enemy ground with explosives in their hands. They will remember the smell of the Japanese shore, the feel of the rails under their fingers, the shock of the explosion, and the sprint back to the safety of the sea. Some will talk about it. Some will keep most of it to themselves. But none of them will ever again see a passing train as something completely separate from the war they fought. In the official record, the operation is a few lines in a report and a note in the history of naval warfare. The only confirmed instance of an American submarine crew destroying an enemy train on its own territory during the Second World War. In the unofficial record, the one that lives in sea stories and veterans' memories, it is something more. It is the moment when a submarine, a weapon designed to fight in deep water, refused to accept its limits and reached all the way to the land with human hands and improvised tools. It is the moment when the USS Barb stopped being just a successful combat vessel and became a legend. Years later, when people look at the emblems and honors associated with the Barb, one detail stands out. Alongside the traditional symbols of a submarine's victories, there is a small image that does not belong to the sea at all, the outline of a locomotive. It is not there by accident. It is there because on one night in 1945, a ghost submarine surfaced, sent a handful of men onto a hostile shore, and proved that even a train, running confidently on its rails deep inside the enemy's home waters, could become a target. And that image, simple and almost humorous at a glance, carries within it the entire weight of that patrol, that explosion, and the message it sent to both sides of the war.